Next news. Breaking news.
While the fake news media was obsessing over their latest manufactured outrage, President Trump just pulled off something that eluded every president for over half a century. Cuba. The communist stronghold 90 miles off our coast is cracking under the pressure of Trump's brutal economic campaign. And that's not all. As Kim Jong-un fires off missiles trying to get attention and Iran sweats over their nuclear program, Donald Trump is playing three-dimensional chess while our enemies scramble to make deals. Obama kissed Castro's ring and got nothing. Trump squeezed them, and they're releasing thousands of prisoners. Want to know what real American strength looks like? I'm going to show you. But here's why this matters to you and your family. See, for decades, communist Cuba has been a festering wound, just 90 miles from Florida, a launch pad for drug trafficking, human smuggling, and a symbol of everything wrong with failed socialist policies. Your tax dollars under Obama went to normalizing relations with murderous dictators who threw political dissidents in dungeons. Meanwhile, Cuban Americans who fled the Castro regime, people whose families were murdered, whose relatives were tortured, watch helplessly as weak American presidents legitimize their tormentors. Now think about the bigger picture. North Korea is lobbing missiles. Iran is sitting on enough enriched uranium for 11 nuclear bombs, and these rogue regimes have watched American weakness for years and gotten bolder, but something changed on January 20th, 2025. President Trump doesn't negotiate from weakness. He negotiates from strength. And right now, America's enemies are learning that lesson the hard way. And Cuba is only the beginning. And speaking of protecting yourself from hostile regimes and global instability, let me tell you about something critical. When communist dictatorships collapse and missiles fly, Wall Street doesn't lose money on the chaos. You do. They create the panic, wait for you to dump your position out of fear, and scoop it up at a discount. The big banks, they're not selling their gold right now, they're buying yours. And every time the headlines scream about North Korean missiles or Iranian nukes, regular people sell in fear. And every time regular people sell, the institutions are right there waiting with open hands. You built portfolio insurance for a reason. Don't let a red day hand it over to the people who caused it. That's why I tell people to work with Noble Gold Investments. They've helped thousands of Americans protect their retirement with physical precious metals. And right now, you can get a free 10th ounce American Gold Eagle just for qualifying. Go to nextnewsgold.com. That's nextnewsgold.com and take control before the next crisis hits. Now I'm going to show you exactly what's happening with these communist regimes right now. See, here's what the mainstream media will not tell you about Cuba's sudden change of heart. This isn't some humanitarian gesture. This is surrender. The communist regime just announced the largest prisoner amnesty in 10 years, releasing over 2,000 inmates, and they happened hours after Trump ramped up the pressure. Israeli officials are now warning that Iran cannot be allowed to become another North Korea, asking the critical question: where is that enriched uranium Tehran bragged about? Well, President Trump's been clear. Iran first, and then Cuba falls. We have this breaking news just in. North Korea firing multiple ballistic missiles, extending a series of tests that have strained hopes in Seoul for easing tensions.
North Korea has fired multiple ballistic missiles toward the sea off its east coast on Wednesday, according to South Korea's military. South Korea's Joint Chief of Staff said the latest launch occurred at around 2:20 p.m. local time. The Japan Coast Guard said the missile fell into the sea about 10 minutes later. Tokyo said no missile entered its territorial waters or exclusive economic zone. On Tuesday, a separate launch was detected near Pyongyang. Citing military officials, South Korea's Yonhap news agency said that it was probably a ballistic missile. The agency said that missile flew eastward before showing signs of an abnormality and disappearing. The incident marked North Korea's 4th, 5th, and 6th ballistic missile launches this year, following 2 in January and a 3rd in March. Analysts say the launches could reflect routine weapons development and may be linked to ongoing engine and propulsion testing, including work on solid fuel systems. Pyongyang has been seeking to upgrade its strike capability with solid fuel missiles that are often easier and safer to operate and require less logistical support than liquid-fueled weapons. South Korea's Presidential Blue House convened an emergency National Security Council meeting on Wednesday. Media reports say it called the earlier launches a provocation that violated UN Security Council resolutions.
Violating UN Security Council. Like Rocket Man really cares. Okay? This is a cry for help, is what it is. All right? Donald Trump is, taking care of business in Iran, in the Middle East, and Rocket Man's feeling a little neglected. He's like, hey guys, remember me? I've got nuclear weapons too. Hey, I'm going to shoot some off. Anyway, North Korea's missile tests are sending a clear message to the region, with Kim Jong-un reminding everyone he's still a major player, but Iran's ambitions pose their own threat, especially with their nuclear bragging rights being questioned. Just as the United States was locking in a ceasefire with Iran, Kim Jong-un reminded the regime he's still very much in the game. North Korea firing another round of ballistic missiles towards the waters off Japan, with South Korean officials saying the missiles flew roughly 240 kilometers before abnormalities were discovered. So Iran's nuclear ambitions are sparking concerns similar to North Korea, but now President Trump has a new target. Let's see what his declaration about Cuba means for negotiations. We have this from Ilan Levy. Iran cannot be allowed to turn into North Korea. It entered negotiations before the war, boasting it had enough highly enriched uranium for 11 nuclear bombs.
To the enriched uranium, it still remains a key issue in all of this. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I've been talking with Israeli officials this morning, and they have been relatively quiet, simply responding, we need to get the job done. They raise a lot of questions about Iran's enriched uranium and questions about if this will be able to be addressed at the negotiating table. They pointed out that nothing has changed from the early days of Operation Epic Fury. And you'll remember U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff talking about how the Iranians first entered into negotiations before this war began, saying that they had enough highly enriched uranium to create 11 nuclear bombs. Israeli officials are asking, where is that enriched uranium? And if the United States believes that as a result of these 2 weeks, they'll be able to get a deal that addresses this nuclear threat. One official said, we don't want Iran to turn into North Korea. And there are serious questions that still remain about the ability to secure that highly enriched uranium, the main reason that this operation began.
Trey, there are two things in the 10-point proposal that are really the biggest red flags, according to all the articles I've read and according to us. Number one is the acceptance of the enrichment. They want to continue to enrich uranium. We can never allow them to do that. In fact, we want to go in and try to get that enriched uranium that is buried underground. So, but then I'm reading that the original 10-point proposal had the acceptance of enrichment in Farsi, in the Farsi version. But then, for some unknown reason, that phrase was missing in the English version that was shared by the Iranian diplomats to journalists. The second thing that is of concern, or biggest concern, is Iran wants control of the Strait of Hormuz. They never had control of the strait. It's dangerous because they border the strait, but they didn't have control, and now they want it.
They not only want control of the strait, they want to also be paid at least $2 million per vessel that passes through the Strait of Hormuz, and then split that money with the government of Oman. And Israeli officials say that money will be used to funnel back into the IRGC weapons program to try and rebuild many of the production lines that were destroyed by the United States and Israel throughout the course of this war. And so the bottom line here is that this isn't over. It is a 2-week ceasefire. And the question remains if the Iranians will be willing to make a good faith deal that addresses all of these issues. But when you look at that 10-point proposal by the Iranians, there are a variety of issues that simply aren't going to happen. Not only red lines for the United States, but for the entire world. There's no scenario in which the U.S. military is going to withdraw completely from the Middle East. There are a variety of bases where U.S. soldiers remain.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. But Trump's focus on Cuba as the next battleground is heating up. Here's our exclusive camera angle from the White House press briefing room with Travis Gilmore of Epoch Times nailing the question on Cuba. Listen.
The president has said Cuba is next. What's the message to the American people regarding Cuba, and what can Cubans expect in relation to this statement?
Well, look, I think when President Trump said that, and he later clarified after making that statement, that he meant the Cuban regime is bound to fall. The country is very weak. They're in a very weak position economically, obviously, financially. The Cuban people are fed up with their government, as they should be. And these talks and discussions continue to happen at the highest level of our government. I don't have any updates or announcements for you with respect to Cuban policy.
And now Cuba wants to make a deal. Here's President Trump.
You're talking to Cuba. What do you want to hear from them, and what is that risk for them?
I am holding Cuba. Cuba's a failed nation. Cuba also wants to make a deal, and I think we will pretty soon, or either make a deal or do whatever we have to do. We have a lot of great people that happen to vote for Trump. Not that that matters, but we have a lot of great people from Cuba that were violently and viciously thrown out of the country, and worse, their families were killed. And so we're talking to Cuba, but we're going to do Iran before Cuba.
And what is at risk?
And people have been waiting 50 years to hear this story with Cuba. When I left Palm Beach today, there were thousands of people on the road. I'm sure you saw them. And they were from Cuba and from Venezuela, all friendly, waving the flag and waving the American flag. They've been waiting 50 years for what's happening with Cuba. So I think something will happen with Cuba pretty quickly.
But of course, he said he's got to take care of Iran first. The Cuban communist regime just started releasing prisoners hours after their amnesty announcement, completely folding under President Trump's brutal pressure. Look at this.
Ex-prisoners walk free hours after the communist-led Cuban government announced a sweeping amnesty on Friday. It has coincided with the most intense pressure campaign applied by Washington in decades. The US said it was closely monitoring whether those it deems to be political prisoners would be among those freed. That has long been a major sticking point in negotiations between Washington and Havana. Reuters spoke with several who'd been pardoned of common crimes ranging from theft to bribery, but none had been involved in anti-government protests. I'm thankful for this gesture, says Harold Baez. It gives me the chance to rebuild my life and rejoin society. More than 2,000 prisoners are set to be released as part of what Cuba's state-run media has called a sovereign and humanitarian gesture, the largest such amnesty in 10 years. The release of all or the majority of political prisoners would be seen as a major concession on Cuba's part in the ongoing talks between the two countries. Human rights groups, some financed by the US government, say Cuba is holding hundreds of political prisoners, with estimates varying, and promise.
President Trump's pressure campaign is working. Now I'm going to break down what you're witnessing here. This is the Trump doctrine in action. For 50 years, American presidents tried diplomacy, appeasement, and outright surrender with these communist and rogue regimes. Obama literally restored relations with Cuba and got nothing in return, not a single political prisoner freed. Trump applies real pressure, economic isolation, oil blockades, maximum sanctions. Within weeks, Cuba starts releasing prisoners. That's not a coincidence, that's leverage. The same playbook is working on Iran. While Kim Jong-un fires missiles desperately trying to stay relevant, he's watching Cuba fold and Iran negotiate. The message to every dictator on earth is crystal clear. There's a new sheriff in town, and he doesn't play games. So this is what America First foreign policy looks like, my friends. Not endless wars, not nation building, not kissing the rings of communist dictators. Pressure, strength, results. President Trump told those crowds of Cuban Americans in Palm Beach they've been waiting 50 years for the moment, and he's delivering. Now I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think that Cuba's communist regime will completely collapse under Trump's pressure, yes or no? Drop your answer, and let's get this conversation going. And if you haven't done so yet, you made it to the end of the video, and now a special message for you that most people won't hear because they don't get this far. Text raw feed to 844-840-4963. That's how you and I maintain a direct line of communication when YouTube notifications never arrive and the algorithm buries our videos and never actually show them to you. So text that raw feed to 844-840-4963 and let's maintain that direct line of communication. And also make sure you are subscribed. You still hit that notification bell because we are covering every development in this historic moment. And if you want to show your support for America First News, check out the Next News merch shelf below this video. We got some great gear, great message, and share this video with every patriot you know because the mainstream media will never give Trump credit for this. I'm Gary Franchi. Stay informed and stay free.
The system controls information. Information control is power. They don't want you to see this. The truth only survives together. They don't want this shared. Share this now.